Class is now in session. I'm Professor Hockey, and today we're discussing some massive news coming out of the Sharks organization today. Well, technically not fully confirmed yet, though many are reporting that Tomas Hertl has signed an 8-year extension with the San Jose Sharks at a value of $8 million. And to get the first thing out of the way, is this contract numerically actually worth it for the Sharks? Well, I would say pretty much right down the middle. This was a relatively easy contract to predict in terms of money and in terms of length. It was obviously going to be 8 years if it was going to be an extension for Hertl, because he's that good of a player that he's able to demand that, and $8 million was around in line where many of his classic comparables around the league currently sit. For instance, his own teammate Logan Couture is also making $8 million for 8 years, and a player who I had compared back at the start of the season in a video earlier, Sean Couturier, is making very close to that amount as well. And so in terms of actual contract, not taking into account any other factors, this is a very good deal for the San Jose Sharks. However, you obviously can't discount those other factors. In my video a couple of days ago where I was discussing what the San Jose Sharks could and would do going up to the trade deadline, I talked about Tomas Hertl, and I believed that the best move was for the Sharks, not really considering any other outside factors, was to move on from Hertl and trade him away at the deadline, get a first-round pick, get a solid prospect, and then commit to that rebuild. The problem was, it was something that you just couldn't really see the San Jose Sharks actually doing. It was just too much of a burden on their finances as a franchise to be able to actively trade away a beloved player like Tomas Hertl and fully commit to just being bad over these next few years. Even if the Sharks are going to be bad over the next few years, which is definitely possible, since you're keeping Hertl and you're really pushing to try and make the playoffs, you still kind of keep that fan belief that this team can go somewhere. But if you're trading Hertl, you have obviously pretty much admitted defeat at that point, and that's a situation that could be difficult to escape from. Even a team like the Buffalo Sabres with extremely passionate fans is now seeing a massive drop in terms of attendance because fans are just tired of watching an awful team take to the ice year in and year out. And that's been the case with Buffalo, and that is definitely a risk that could have happened had the Sharks traded Hertl. At least now, if the correct moves are made, you could potentially ice a playoff team. Will the San Jose Sharks be competitive over these next few years because of this re-sign of Tomas Hertl? It's kind of hard to predict. It's possible. It's also very possible that it won't happen, but you're clearly trying at the very least, which is, for the San Jose Sharks perspective, hopefully enough. Now, moving on into the next year, where does this really leave the San Jose Sharks? Because at this point, with this Tomas Hertl signing, like I mentioned, this was a turning point for the franchise, and they've made it extremely clear no rebuild is happening, so we have to put that completely out of our mind. That's not what's happening. We have to take a look at what exactly is the Sharks' plans for next season. I'm not going to do a full review here in this just brief news video, but I will take a look at what the Sharks might want to do with their top six, and considering the top six forwards was their biggest issue this season thus far, they just do not have any offense. It's definitely something to target improving. Going into next season, the Sharks will have Hertl and Couture locked up long-term, and Meier, while not long-term, he's here for at the very least that 1 year, and considering the Sharks, clearly went out of their way to try and retain Hertl, they likely would end up doing the same for Meier as well. So we expect that those three players will be a top six, or three of the top six for the Sharks for the foreseeable future. The problem is, while Hertl and Meier are still relatively young, on the correct side of 30, Couture is on the wrong side of 30, and so while he has been quite serviceable thus far this season as a top-line center or a second-line center, depending on how you view him and Hertl interchangeably there, will he still be a strong enough player to be a competitive top six player over these next couple of years? That is definitely the question. And then you also have to fill in those last three spots. Right now, this season, the only player who has actually been even relatively close to being a top six player, and it's already kind of arguable there, would be Alex Barabanov. He's looked quite solid this season. I'm not sure if you would consider him a good second liner at this point, but he is a serviceable second liner at the very least. However, when it comes to the other two spots, the Sharks have been at a complete complete loss. Dahlen hasn't really been consistent enough. They tried Dzingel, they tried Gregor, they've tried Leonard now the past game and are going to be giving him another go at it. They've tried a lot of different players. Kevin Labanc, prior to his injury, was also attempted in this spot, and nobody really fit in. And so at best, the Sharks have had 4 solid top 6 players, and it's kind of, even you would maybe want to even just say the 3, and that's just not nearly good enough when you look at the obviously top competitive teams. A team like the Tampa Bay Lightning, Kucherov, Point, and Stamkos are probably all better than any forward the Sharks are currently icing. The same goes with a team like Toronto with Matthews and Marner and Tavares. These are fantastic players that the Sharks just at the moment can't really compete with. Going into next season, there is a possibility that a player like William Eklund could step up into a role here and fill out some of that top 6, and there is definitely hope that a player like Dahlen could take a step forward and maybe become a solid top 6 player. But right now, it's kind of a murky future for the Sharks top 6, but at the very least, I guess, depending on how you look at it, Tomas Hertl being locked in for the next 8 years is a good thing. Class dismissed.